Meme is not an original English language word. Although brought into common speech in the early 2000s to describe viral internet trends, the word meme was introduced in Richard Dawkins' 1976 popular nonfiction book, The Selfish Gene.
It's a slightly weird world you get into if you start searching for memetics. It's not one that I'm entirely happy with. I suppose I should just reiterate that my original purpose was not really to start a school of thought in human culture, but rather just to downplay the gene as being the only unit of Darwinian selection that one could imagine.
Ah, Richard Dawkins.
Hitler, Adolf Hitler.
And it's the facts plus the sensitivity, when convolved together, convolved creates impact.
Hitler, Adolf Hitler, was a Roman Catholic.
And I worry that your methods and how articulately barbed you can be ends up simply being ineffective when you have much more power of influence than what is currently reflected in your output.
I gratefully accept the rebuke. Science is interesting. If you don't agree, you can fuck off.
Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist, but has mostly distinguished himself as a stand-up philosopher, pop author, and atheism debater.
What if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great juju at the bottom of the sea?
In The Selfish Gene, memes and the field of memetics were proposed as a means of studying cultural development and the spread of ideas in a manner similar to studying the evolution of organisms through genetic replicators in DNA.
The act of reproduction at the genetic level would be the act of copying an idea from one brain to another.
The meme is analogous to a gene and is considered the source code for the replication of culture.
Anything which has that property that genes have of making exact copies of themselves, anything that has that property would do.
Both the original meaning of meme and its popular mutation are accepted definitions. These are extremely fast-spreading, fast-dying, typically low-impact memes. A virus, pollen, fungus, or bacteria are good analogies for how internet communication works, implying infection, desiccation, rot, and composting of ideas. This usage is an extension of the original meaning, but is not entirely faithful.
It's anything that behaves like a gene in human culture.
Memetics is intended to address all kingdoms of life, which is to say not just cult fads, but also the most timeless and profound ideas we hold and have access to.
It could be a style of dress, it could be an accent, it could be a favorite word, it could be
the wheel, the lens, the Renaissance, drum rudiments, bullet time, shoegazing, planking, larfing, doxing, gorilla masking, upper decking, Acheulean stone tools, Taylor Swifting.
Anything like that which is copied from one person to another.
The original purpose of memetics was to examine the development of society at a mechanistic level in terms of recognizable and teachable information patterns. In this sense, the dynamics of online communication are only one layer in a larger system. One key takeaway is that the development of thought is less a creative process and more a process of replication, mutation, and synthesis.
Whistling a tune, and somebody else catches the tune, almost like catching a virus, and they whistle the tune, and they walk off into the street whistling the same tune.
This perspective decentralizes the individual organism or multi-organismic population and recenters on what is actually exhibiting evolutionary characteristics, which in the case of people is technology, morality, and ideas. There is continuing debate concerning whether a meme in the brain has the same kind of physical material reality status as the replicators found in DNA, which would serve to validate the study of memetics as a science. And this need not concern us in any way. Memetics did not set out to solve the problem of the nature of mind, so we can set that aside for the moment. We can call whatever an idea is, however real we want to consider it. From what I can tell, Dawkins is himself unconcerned with this distinction.
Various objections have been raised to the theory of memes, and by the way, I should add that I only ever proposed it in order to downplay the gene as the only unit of natural selection.
Whether memes are a metaphor or a physical reality is like asking whether language or personhood are a physical reality or a metaphor. These are timeless philosophical questions, and yet all of these things are quite easily studied if we can just ignore for the moment that they are socially constructed or imaginary within a physically real brain. We'll come back to that. But while we're dealing with the imaginary, let us at least do so openly.
I mean, it's hardly even based on evidence. It's a statistical calculation.
Right.
It's a kind of plausibility calculation.
Right. This is so cool to think about.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to get high later? Living organisms had existed on Earth without ever knowing why for over 3,000 million years before the truth finally dawned on one of them. His name was Charles Darwin. That sounds to me like a religious statement. That is near messianic language. And you are making the case that these other people have this virus of the mind. That tonality says, I found my God.
Dawkins proposed the idea of a memeplex, which is memes that appear together, like an ecosystem. It is somewhat arbitrary what you would call a meme or a memeplex. It is a matter of how granular you wish to see the matter for the present purpose, and as you can see in any Venn diagram, there will be overlap. Most importantly, it begs the question, what are the categories of the known? How do I define the basics of what I am experiencing? How does a person orient oneself to the reality that they cannot know everything, but still must contend with everything?
If the universe is queerer than we can suppose, is it just because we've been naturally selected to suppose only what we needed to suppose in order to survive in the Pleistocene of Africa? Or are our brains so versatile and expandable that we can train ourselves to break out of the box of our evolution?
What are the categories of categories? What is the most meta memeplex? How thin can memes be sliced? We have not drawn any of these boundaries ourselves. We have not evaluated or prioritized the knowledge that we have access to as a general rule. We have not gotten our memes consciously organized. In our culture, this would be considered a weird thing to do.
But once you get a big brain, then the big brain can be used for other things. Computers were originally designed as calculating machines, and then without any change, without any alteration in their general structure, it turns out that they can be used as word processors as well. There's something about human brains which makes them more versatile than they were originally intended for.
While biologists have much to teach us about ourselves, there is also much to learn from art, literature, and experience that really isn't appropriately reduced to DNA, reproduction, and survival. Although you can do this.
You can drive a car with your feet if you want to.
Whatever development is occurring within us as individuals, or the development of our shared mental space, or the development of our culture, whatever we want to call that, it clearly is developing, and that development is clearly not reducible to DNA and biology any more than it is reducible to molecules and atoms, or cells and tissues, matter and energy. The human organism can be reduced to a cluster of DNA or a cluster of cells, a brain connected to some hardware, a skeleton of bones, molecules, chemicals, energetic impulses, 11th dimensional vibrations, just as a society can be reduced to a cluster of individuals, or particles, or chemicals, or 11th dimensional vibrating wavicles. But why reduce when you can study the thing on its own terms, at its own level? Your personhood is a memeplex. It can be analyzed as a complete functional system of interrelated informational patterns. MEMETICS gives theoretical grounding to the self-evident apprehension that what has happened with the societies of people on Earth bears a striking similarity to what has happened with the biological species on Earth. So much so that in common speech, we often talk about the evolution of society or culture or humanity or even the self as though that term described something other than or anything other than DNA adapting to environmental pressures. Again, you can totally do that.
That don't make it a good f***ing idea.
For some strange reason, random chance, animals have had the opportunity to evolve into mental beings, doing this mental activity which just happens to look a lot like evolution, so much so that we call it that in common speech. At this point, several cans of worms have been opened, and many of these cans are far more interesting than the one we are currently in.
Man, f*** you.
I followed the worms all the way back to the source.
What could be more important than an understanding of why you're here, why you're the shape you are, why you have the brain that you do, why your body is the way it is, not just you, but all the other 30 million species of living things.
I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool.
Feel free to hit the comments with any questions, observations, fix any errors, argue and call me names. This is interactive. If you want to know more about memetics and not my particular slant on it, I would recommend The Selfish Gene, videos about memetics, some of which I have used clips from here, so you could view those. There is a link in the description to a recent unaffiliated video you may find interesting, discussing how memetics helps to resolve the cognitive dissonance which can be the result of people holding beliefs that seem really obviously false and unjustifiable.